You've reached Monster 911, and I'm Lance Hightower. I've been taking cryptid emergency calls for over 5 years. If you have a cryptid emergency, please call our toll-free number, 866-306-8085. I can help you. What's your emergency?
I'm on the base of the Ochoco Mountains and Larch Mountain. The one thing that you notice right away, it's like geological rock formations, all the way through this from the Great Flood. It's gorgeous. It really is. It's breathtaking scenery. So, I moved up here about 12, it's maybe been 13, 14 years ago.
Okay.
And I was, everything started for me when I was down in college, and I had to do these peer-reviewed articles. And I chose Monsanto and chemtrails. And, man, that really, really started to open my eyes to what was really going on. And during that process, I started having reoccurring vivid dreams. And I'd have the same dream over and over and over. And it was, we're a family of excavators. We underground excavation and heavy equipment.
Okay.
And this one dream was me and my dad and my younger brother, and we're doing this work out there in Boring where I grew up. And my dream, every time there's this fire that comes raining out of the sky. And I just remember each time it'd be different. But me and my dad and my brother were frantically doing something, and this fire would come like we're preparing for something, right?
Okay.
And I remember this fire just coming down, and I'm grabbing my brother, I'd thrown him under like the steel girders and I-beams. My dad's creeping back in this big hole he dug, and then I'd wake up. And there was another time where that same dream would happen, and I remember it was like these fiery phoenixes. They were coming out of the sky, and when they got to me at chest level, it just blew me to the ground like they were like holy. Crazy dreams. Floods, earthquakes, military coming in, locking everyone up, gathering people up.
Well, sometimes dreams that reoccur over and over, you don't want to say that they are what is exactly going to happen, but it's almost like a message.
Right. That's the sense I got. And then there was one dream that I've had reoccurring, and it was just this one dream, man. It was just dark. And it's like darkness came over the land, and it didn't stop. And there was just horror, just screams and yells everywhere, and just something ripping through the hillside, just making carnage. That's a dream I'll never forget. I wake up from just sweats. Oh man. But, when I moved up here, immediately I noticed, sounds and things going on. And, I'm a car guy, too. I buy and sell cars and fix them and whatever I can to make a buck and a hobby.
Cool. Okay. I love cars.
Mainly I can't afford nice stuff, so I got to buy stuff broken and fix it up.
Yep.
And then I get to play with it for a while, sell it, make some money, and move on to something different.
Gotcha.
But when I moved up here, I got real sick.
You got real sick? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I got really ill, and then I got in a bad traffic accident, and I had a back operation, and
oh man,
yeah, things really kind of took a turn.
Okay.
And then the roommate I had, she went off the deep end, and her dad came up and flew up from California and took her back down in California, so I got stuck up here, kind of like I was afraid I would.
Oh, man.
She really wanted to live up here. I didn't want to, because the work that this modular home needed, and I just wasn't interested in it. But, something drugged me up here, it was beyond me, and, here I am, que sera, sera. I got married and had a daughter, and but when I moved up here, immediately, about 12, 13 years ago, I noticed, things going bump at night. And I was like, man, somebody's out after my parts.
What do you mean when you say that? Do you mean literally hitting on your house, or?
Yeah, I'd hear stuff racket and bumps, and And I talked to my landlords. I said, I heard someone out here the other night, but I couldn't find anybody. In the first couple of years, I would be out there in my tactical gear and my AR or whatever, combing through the area. And I'd never see anything. And I'd ask my landlords, and they said, well, you live in the country now. And, I didn't buy that for one moment, because I lived in the country my whole life.
He didn't act weird about it.
No, they always just... But, see, they never lived in this modular home. They lived, probably 100 feet from me.
All right.
And they're right there. They have a nice farmhouse. And then they have a nice big barn with like an apartment, nice big shop, And it's got a nice awning all the way around it. And then he's got the nice farmhouse. And then the road turns on a 90. And I'm the next driveway behind them. And right as you pull in my driveway, there's a huge barn / silo. It's half underground because the wind is horrible up here. Because I'm right by, and I'm a mile from. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I have, actually.
Notorious for wind. Oh my gosh, it's horrible.
In fact, that's kind of how I know it. I've heard the high winds at times.
Oh, gosh, our power goes out. I mean, you have to have a wood stove because it goes out, 3 to 6 times, sometimes for weeks on end up here.
Wow.
Yeah, most people that got money have generators. I've got one, but I've never really used it. That was the first thing I noticed was there's strange things that would take place. And then I noticed and I caught on that something would literally slap the side of the house. Like hard hit the side of the house.
Wow.
Well, whatever. I didn't know. And it wasn't till my wife and I were expecting our first child, and we went on a hike probably about 3 miles from our house. It's called, and it's just right down the road from.
Okay.
And I remember we were hiking up this trail up to the falls, and it was, it was still a couple hours of daylight left, and we hiked maybe about a mile up the trail, and we heard this low guttural growl, and I said, oh my gosh. I grabbed her, and I said, you need to get back to the car. And I immediately start scanning, and I'm thinking in my head, shoot, that's not a coyote. That's, what is that? I'm thinking in my head, that's not a cougar, but it's got some throat to it, and I just didn't understand because I couldn't see anything. Okay. It maybe went, to the right was a drop off to the falls, it was a straight cliff, and on the left it went up a big bank up into another cliff, and I just didn't understand why I couldn't see this animal. And I grabbed her and I said, hey, it's time for us to get out of here. I said, you heard that? And she goes, yeah. And I said, run, And, of course, she didn't. And I said, well, what's the point of me staying here to kind of, protect you guys? To be a distraction. Why you stay here with me?
Right.
And on our way down, we tried warning some folks, and they looked at us like we were crazy. So I just, whatever. Kind of looking back, connecting the dots, this is kind of, the chronological order of things.
Sure.
And, some time it went by, and I was working on a truck of mine. And I was waiting for her to get home for work. It was probably this time of year, really close, summertime. Because of the cell reception, I was up on the next road. So you go down Wand Road, you take that 90-degree left turn, and it goes up to the top, and there's a T. And I went up to that T section. So I was literally one house up on the next road, and I could look down my field And, there's my neighbors and my neighbor's barn behind me, and I could look down the field past my house and past my landlord's to see if my wife, when she would come home, I would just hop out of my truck, get in it, and drive home. And I'm sitting there for about 40 minutes on my phone looking through forms on transmissions. And my neighbor comes up to see who I was and didn't realize it was me. Oh, it's you. Oh, okay. Great. And so I was sitting on the left side of the shoulder closest to property and fence where her field is. And I had to get out and walk across because she was on the far lane. And when she had left, I had my back to, I'd probably say 1 square acre of forest. And on the right side, there's a house. And on the left side of this 1 square acre, it's all field and it opens up. And so now I'm looking dead down where my wife would be, looking at my phone, and I hear this giant snap of a branch off to my right. So I turn my head down the ditch line on the side of the road I'm at, towards behind me where the forest is, and I start walking down, and I see something black up there on my right. And so I'm moseying down, kind of looking up at my phone, looking up at it, and just kept walking until I was parallel right in front of it. And I was 7 to 8 feet, but I was down in the ditch, and it went up on a bank, maybe a couple of feet, and then it went up to sticker bushes.
Okay.
And then the sticker bushes, once it reached the sticker bushes, there was a forest line. And I see something jet black, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, oh, crap, one of the cows got out. So I look over in the field to count 5 cows, and I remembered, got rid of her cows. Oh, okay. And I'm looking, and I'm looking at this thing, kind of, what the heck is that? Is that a bear? Is a black bear? What is that? Is that a moose? Is that an elk? And I can't understand what I'm looking at. And then finally it steps out of the blind it was under. And here I am, eye to eye with what looks like, the best way to describe it is a giant silverback gorilla. At the moment, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, well, I'm looking at a silverback gorilla. I guess we got these up here in
Wow.
West. And for whatever reason, I finally put my phone down. I have my phone in between me and it. I'm 6 feet from it. I'm looking at it eye to eye.
6 feet?
Yes. It's just 6 to 8 feet.
God.
Giving the incline. I mean, we were close. And that's when we locked eyes and it stepped out and I was looking at him. And that's when I was like, I looked down. I said, hey. I don't know what I was thinking. I was just kind of all in shock. I said, hey. And I looked down for my footing because I was going to go up there right next. I don't know what I was thinking. I was just going to walk up to it. And if it would have let me, I would have walked right up to it. And that's, as soon as I looked down, that's when all hell broke loose. And this thing just started ripping through the forest like, oh. And that's when the adrenaline kicked on, and I ripped right through them sticker bushes, just bloody mess, chasing after this thing. Sounded like a bull elephant or a dozer.
Okay, wait. You were chasing it?
Yep, I chased it. Yep.
So it ran for a second.
Me.
So you guys are staring at each other for a second.
Yep.
And this is about, what's the daylight like? Is it night, evening?
Nope, it's broad daylight.
Broad daylight. You saw this. Yep. Then it took out and you ran after it.
Yep. When I said, hey, and I looked down for my footing, it bounced and it just destroyed the trees and branches. Like it wasn't trying to, it was like, oops, I got to go. And that's when my adrenaline kicked in. I just ran right through there. And I ran maybe 25 yards, maybe 10, 15. And it started to come into this clearing, which I didn't really expect. But, I hadn't been up in there, so it didn't really shock me. But what shocked me was when I got to this clearing, I couldn't see it, and I didn't understand. And I didn't think that it got that far away. But when I stepped foot into the clearing and I stopped for a second and I started to kind of scan my surroundings looking for this thing, that's when it was like, best way to describe it was I stepped into this dead zone. It was dead. It was quiet. The atmosphere had changed. The energy in my body had changed. And that's when, a voice was like, I assume it was the Holy Spirit. It was like, what do you think you're doing? You have absolutely no business chasing after this animal or this creature. You need to get out of here now. That's when the fear kicked in. I hightailed it out of there. I sprinted out of there, sprinted back to my truck, hopped in my truck, and I ripped home, and I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't tell anyone anything. Didn't, tell a word to anyone.
So that's amazingly crazy for you to do that. That's your inquisitive mind took over rather than fear, and you just went after your instincts.
Right. Well, I didn't know what I was looking at. But when I looked at it eye to eye, I had no fear of it because I knew, like, what I got was this thing was smart. It knew right from wrong. Like, that's what gives me the goosebumps and the chills more than anything. Was like, I knew it had reason. It was smart. It was inquisitive. It was intelligent. It knew wrong and right. I mean, you could...
Now, if you don't mind my asking, what makes you say that based on, some people will say that, but I'm just, from your point of view, what makes you say that in that moment you locked eyes?
I just saw there was a peace about him. Like, he wasn't acting a fool, But I definitely could tell, I guess, more like hindsight too.
Okay.
Because, I asked myself, well, what was he... he got my attention. And I got to ask myself, well, what was he trying to tell me? And what I gathered from all that was, one, he was at a sentinel post. And two, he was more of a juvenile one, and he was more curious too. But also, he was telling me, hey, wake up. You don't know you don't know your surroundings. You need to wake up and pay attention. And that's immediately, what I gathered, thinking about that was like, oh, man, that thing was telling me to wake up and pay attention. I was like, hey, look, I've been watching you for over an hour, and you don't even know it. And
he decided to reveal himself. I mean, that's the one thing, because they don't have to, but if you get too close to, in my mind, this is the way I think, if you're getting too close to them hunting or the other family members doing something or in the area where they live or whatever, like you said, more of a sentinel, just kind of sitting back, monitoring the area, scout, but he decided to reveal himself like, hey, I'm here, you need to kind of back off. Tell me a little bit of the description of what time of year was this? What season?
It was about this time of year.
Oh.
A little bit earlier, like a month or so earlier. And it's always around these times of years that the activity really picks up. But I haven't had any... Well, this is what I've learned. I don't know how I know it, but it's like they're seasonal. It's like the Bigfoot are here one time of the year, and then the Dogmen come in and the Bigfoot move. And it always seems like it's around like October, December. But based on my last encounter, I'd say that the Dogmen come in a heck of a lot earlier than I thought.
So you had an encounter with a Dogman?
Oh yeah, I've seen them all.
Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. So, what did this Bigfoot look like? Did it stand up on two legs? Was it on four? And
no, he was standing upright. He was standing vertical. Now, I didn't see his lower half. I just saw his chest and his shoulders and his arms, but mainly his head. And man, it's so crazy. I mean, immediately I'm just like, man, I'm looking at a gorilla, but he had like a jet black head. I mean, his fur was like jet black. I want to say it had like maybe a little bit of silver to it. I really tried to put it out of my mind. I tried to put all this out of my mind because it caused me so much stress and panic. When I had the second encounter after this one, I melted. But he was jet black. He had a bit of a pronounced dome, not too much, but I remember his shoulders were just wide, like 4 feet wide. I mean, he had to be 1.5 feet to 2 foot thick. I would say from about pecs up is what I saw. And I seen his face. His face was black, and there was some skin around the lips and around the eyes, but it was mainly covered in hair. And his eyes were like a darkish brown, and I did see some whites on the side.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was there a distinctive brow above the eyes, like a brow ridge or anything like that?
Yes, there was. Yep.
And how about the nose? Was it more flattened, human-like, rather than a gorilla?
I would say it was more human. It was more. He looked like a gorilla, but he looked more man-like in the facial features, the lips and the nose and the eyes.
Okay. What kind of a look did he... You said he had this intelligence, this innate, wisdom, and what kind of a look was it? Was his eyes large, or did he just kind of stare at you up and down, or just...
Oh, yeah. I would say his eyes were probably... I mean, they were open, and no, he just looked at me straight in my eyes. We just locked eyes, and we were just staring at each other right in the eyes at that time when he stepped out and showed himself. His eyes were probably the size of golf balls. Now, I'm not saying his eyes had toothpicks in them or anything, but I'm just saying overall, man, they were big eyes. I mean, he was a big boy, and I could tell he wasn't done growing. You know what I'm saying?
He had a youth look to him.
Yeah, he wasn't full grown. I would say he was probably 400 pounds.
Oh,
maybe
okay.
350, 400. I mean, he could have been a lot more than that because of the muscle, but I'm just guessing off of hunting and, things like that. He was probably about 400 pounds.
Wow.
And the way he tore through those woods, he was serious business, man. Whew, boy. So... about I didn't tell anybody. And about 2 years later, and I remember that night too. I do remember that night, because we get, like a good month or two of summer straight. And I remember that night, it got socked in and rained out of nowhere. And I remember thinking to myself, man, that's odd. I remember coming back outside that night, and it was raining, and it seemed to happen out of nowhere. And I thought, man, that was really bizarre.
Huh.
Okay, so then I would say 2 years later, to the month, the same type of year, hot summer day, about 2 years later, a friend of mine had called. And by this time, my daughter's like 1 or 2, and my wife and my daughter are sleeping. And my friend calls me up. And, something, he said something was bothering him. It was probably about 10 o'clock at night. And he had told me that something was wrong, and he didn't know what it was, and he was, he was really uneasy, and he said his spirit meter was going off. And I said, okay.
He was uneasy because he had been outside, or just in general?
Yeah, he just kept telling me his spirit meter's going off, and that he needs to come up and see me. I said, okay. I said, come on up. And we stayed on the phone the whole time he was driving up here. And I would say, man, it was 2 years later to that same doggone time of year, that round within that same time of month. You know what I mean? That I had my sighting.
Okay.
And, he drives up here, and he goes through town, and then, boom, you're on the highway. And as soon as he gets onto this bridge, he starts telling me that there are blacked, unmarked cars parked all up and down and there's weird-looking men searching for something. And he said it was freaking him out. And I said, well, why are you freaking out? I said,
as he's going to your place, he sees this.
Yeah, on his way to my place. And this was maybe 2 miles from my house.
Oh.
If that, a mile and a half.
Okay.
And I said, well, just, slow down, pop your head out the window, and, just go ahead and ask him, hey, are you guys okay? Do you need help? Do you lose your dog? What's going on? He was like, no, I am not stopping. He's like, it is scary. It is not right. It is wrong. I said, okay. So he comes up to my road, and he says, oh, my gosh, they are up here, too. And by this time, his voice is cracking, and he's freaking out pretty good. He says, they've got blocked off. And he says, they're doing something. I don't know what they're doing, but they're looking for something, David. I said, all right, okay. Well, he pulls into my driveway, and he says, oh, my gosh, there's cars. There's something's weird. There's cars parked in front of your house, too. And I said, all right, just get up here. So he gets up here. We walk down, and, sure enough, there's an old Mustang parked, on the other side of my barn. We have a row of cedar trees for a windbreak, and then it's the street. So I walk down, and I walk down my driveway to the road, and I look to the left past the cedar trees, and there's a little 5.0. Probably that guy Scott and that other guy on drugs up here, and they're probably just stealing stuff, and maybe that's who's been slapping around my house at night trying to go through my stuff.
Right.
I said, I'm going to get him. I'm going to catch him. I'm going to run him out of here. And so we go inside my garage. And inside, you walk in my garage door, and to the left, you got a couple little stairs, and it goes up like 3 feet to a little set of stairs that go into my laundry room. And I have a set of windows. So he's inside the garage door. I'm to the left of him. And he's standing in the garage door with the door shut and deadbolted. And I'm standing up the stairs, and I'm looking directly at him. And there's windows to my right, and then to his left is the door. So we got the door in the wall of my garage, and I've got a big, huge shop light out here shining on my driveway. And him and I talked for about 10 minutes, and out of my peripheral vision, I see, now I look back on it. Whatever it was really big and fast. But I saw something out of my peripheral vision run down my driveway really fast. And I said, there he is. And I stood up. And I went down the stairs, and I grabbed the door and undeadbolted my door. And my buddy slams the door and deadbolts it, grabs my wrist and says, you do not go out there. And I go, what are you doing? Get off of me. I've never seen him like that, ever. And I took off, and I ran straight down my driveway because I think I'm going to catch this guy hopping in his Mustang, stealing stuff from people. And as soon as I get to the cedar tree break, I turn my head, and I notice kind of all simultaneously that it's socked in, it's foggy, and it's misty out. And I'm like, what the heck? And I remember, Mike was telling me that it was raining on his way up here, and I didn't believe it. But I remember as soon as I get to that cedar tree break and I look left, all of a sudden I feel the ground shake. Like, have you ever heard of a Clydesdale horse or a horse trotting through the field, like a really big horse, and it's just, you can feel the ground shake?
Yes, it's just ground tremors.
That's exactly what it was like, but it was only 2 feet. And I remember thinking, I was irritated. I was like, I'm going to turn around, and this chucklehead is going to be kissing me. He's on the back of my neck. He's touching me. And I turn around, and I said, Mike, and there's nobody. And I looked up at my garage. I go, what was that? And I just see him turn his light on his phone and shine up the doorway. He's not fixing to leave the house. And I start walking up the driveway. I go, what the hell just ran by me that shook the ground? Well, we kind of make a joke about it. And I said, well, probably some demonical spirit up here, trying to mess with, God's children. He's mad he can't get us. And, he slowly walks to me and he says, I don't know. So about 10 minutes later, he leaves. Well, the driveway's kind of on an incline. He's got a little Honda. And he didn't want to, disturb my landlords because sound travels up here. So he backs out of here with the car off. So when you walk down my driveway to the right, there's two rows of arborvitaes that are about 20 feet tall, not 18 foot tall, but they're double road. And they go on like for 10 feet, and then they go 90. And in the corner is my landlord's shed. And then to the left is the cedar trees and the barn, the huge silo barn that's half underground.
Oh, okay.
So as he was backing up, he was in the road, he started his car and flipped the lights on. And right as he did, whatever I saw running down here, and by the way, when I was walking back, there was black helicopters flying around, circling around. And I did make that comment to him as we were walking back up to each other. I go, you ain't kidding, they are searching for something. And he's like, yeah, I told you. And so he flipped the lights on, and whatever this thing was crossing the road. And he about came undone. And I get in the house and I see my phone. I've got 20 missed calls, and I finally call him back and I go, "What the heck is going on?" And he was just shaking and quivering. He's like, "I'm down the road, and I don't believe in Bigfoot, but dude, you have a Bigfoot up there, and do not go outside." And I go, "What?" That's when it clicked. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'd never ever even told him about my experience.
Oh, okay.
But then, I mean, this was late at night, but that's what sent it home. That's when the fear and the panic really took in. And he was going off about descriptions on this thing. And I noticed my adrenal glands and my fear just turning up. And I was like, please, not right now, not right now. Not right now. Because I knew I was just shoulder to shoulder with whatever this was, and it could have took my head clean off. I knew it.
So he said it was a Bigfoot.
Well, that's what he was saying. But then he started describing, he says, I don't know. He started saying it had a muzzle. I remember him saying it had like a bear or dog muzzle on it. And it was just black and fast and massive. And he was panic-stricken. And all he wanted to do was describe it to me. And I stopped him because I didn't want to know anymore. Because from then on, I didn't sleep. I couldn't eat regularly. I was in fear for my life, my family's life mainly. Because it clicked on me that, okay, there's these things are up here. What are they doing up here? What's going on? And this before I really even knew anything about any of it.
Right,
and
right.
That was the night, where things changed for me, and I started digging into this and researching it, and just, yeah, and I started learning about it. And at the time, I didn't even know about Dogman.
So he was describing the features of it, what you think was a Dogman at this point in time, right?
I don't know, man. Maybe it was the type 3, the kind of the cross between.
Well, that's what I was thinking. It's possible. But prior to this, you hadn't really told anybody anything. So
Nope.
Yet you see these unmarked, you see low-flying helicopters, and then you have these cars that were some guys walking around. Now, did he say that they had government tags, or?
No, it was not time. He didn't know. It gave him the creep factor if something was severely not normal, and he wanted nothing to do with it.
Okay.
And I push and prod him for answers now. He does not want to talk about it. He will not talk about it, which is...
Oh, even to this day?
He's not... He doesn't tell me stuff like that unless it happened to him. And now, when I bring it up and I want to know details, I don't know, Dave. I don't know what it was. It could have been anything. It could have been a guy. It could have been a deer. I don't know.
Right.
That's the thing that drives me nuts the worst, Yeah, I think that he started to sense the panic and fear I was in. Okay. And so I think that he just started to downplay it and was like, no, just relax, you're fine, and that's when I started researching this stuff, and I started learning about it, and I started picking up on all the stuff that was happening, and I knew, I'd known And I knew now, because, right at my place, my landlords, they got a beautiful little orchard. We got blueberries. We got a huge, gorgeous AWA, the AWA tree from, what's that movie called? Avatar?
Oh, yeah.
We've got a black walnut tree that is just, man, it is spectacular. I've never seen anything like it. And, I mean, that's in my driveway. And on the other side, there's apples, blueberries, and everything. So, no wonder. I would come down here, too, in the summertime if I was a Bigfoot, You know what I mean?
Yeah, when you have orchards like that, and, they're in season at different times. So, I had a lady that's...
Oh, because of the late, and through that process, I started learning and reading and researching just nonstop. And I could tell it was starting to drive my wife insane. She's, kind of throwing an attitude. And I tried to explain to her, hey, this is what happened to me. And she's like, well, David, I believe you saw something, but Bigfoot missed me with that, okay? And, the truth is, I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg, man. I can't even begin to tell you the amount of crap and demonic activity that has happened in our life. We had shadows running around our house.
Who did this? Who?
No, we just have shadows.
Oh, I see.
Shadows, all kinds of crazy crap.
Oh, gosh.
And this time since, so I woke up the next day, right, after we had that, and I started to do a little bit of research, and I called my buddy, because it's like Shangri-La up here. It's really hard to get into because it's such a beautiful area, and it's, really renowned for its school. And I called my buddy that night after my buddy had called me and told me not to go outside. So I called my buddy immediately that lived down the road. And I pretty much called him in panic and fear. And I'm just shaking and I'm just coming undone. And, it's like 3 a.m. by this time. And a good old brother, he just starts praying in the spirit, man, and calms everything down. And he says, look, if anything happens, I'll be over there locked and loaded. I'll be there in 3 minutes. You just let me know. And so and I, we catch up the next day, and he starts telling me of an experience he had.
Oh.
And he's maybe 2 miles as the crow flies. And so as him and I start kind of digging into this, and we're out walking the area looking for signs, and that's when I learned that these Roa arborvitaes are double road, and you can go in the middle of them. So it's the next day, me and my buddy hooked up, and he says, well, let's go out and look for any evidence. So right where that thing left, I found probably about 8 foot up, about a 3-inch branch broken and twisted. And that's all I found because it rained that night.
Oh.
I thought, you cheeky, clever bastards, how do you know when it's going to rain? And as I've tried to research and tried to catch this stuff, I've noticed that the activity happens and then the rain happens. So I don't know if these things know when it's going to rain.
Well, it's usually prior to a front or raining, barometric pressure will fall. And as it falls, different animal, we know that behaviors change in animals. We know that for humans, farmers, the old joke is that, a farmer will say his foot's going to hurt or his trick knee is going to hurt. Well, the reason why is that joints that are inflamed, they will actually swell as the barometric pressure falls. So for animals, we don't know really this internal regulation, what they have, but I'm sure as the barometric pressure falls, there's got to be some physiological change that they know is coming on, is what I surmise. But it's not beyond impossible. Let's just say that.
No, yes, I agree with that, because my arthritis kicks up like an SOB. Although when it's hot, then all of a sudden the next day it's cold and rainy, I am just locked up sometimes. Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah, and that's joints that are inflamed, whether it be arthritis or an injury, anything that's inflammatory will expand the joints, and the nerve endings are in the joint and the surrounding joint, just kind of like the bark of a tree. They're not on the internal part of the joint, of course, where the synovial fluid is at on the surface, but it's in the joint tissue, the ligament tissue. So that's but animals, they have other physiological, anatomical means to determine weather changes. So, and light, of course, but who knows in these creatures, these cryptids, what exactly internally when they know weather coming on, which, weather changes is a very common feature with these creatures being active.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Sorry about that. I had to open my front door. So my buddy and I, him and I started really digging into this, and typically we try to make our visits, Christ-centered, Christ-focused, learning about the Holy Spirit, learning about warfare, suit up in the armor of God, encouraging one another.
Yep.
But we also believed 110% that there's something else going on, and this guy is really gifted. He just left his house and disappeared into the mountains. He's gone.
Oh,
I haven't heard since. He had been storing everything you could think of. Every type of, and he's the type of guy, like, he would have made a great special forces soldier. He's the guy you want on your side. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he just kept telling me it's coming, and pretty much we're here at the home front of Revelations, and it's on its way. And wise man seeth danger and get out of the way. But in that process, he drove himself mad, and he's a recovering addict, but he got into drinking, and he just went off the deep end and disappeared. Man, I had to help his wife move and everything.
Oh my. Well, and that's the thing that's it's very, there's a lot of shows right now that are on YouTube and networks. If you watch the news, just watching the news will just kind of drive a person to high anxiety, let alone watching these channels, whether it's the homestead channels, especially the homestead channels. They're talking about the same thing that we all have been knowing, this innate, this internal, that food sources will be, I believe, also shortened. They're going to be higher prices, and there's going to be it's a very high likelihood on the horizon that the food in general is going to be hard to come by. So that makes people anxious and stressed, and they don't know how to really deal with it, because people have certain budgets and fixed incomes. I mean, how much is enough? And if you don't hunt, and if you're on a fixed budget, how do you afford to keep eating? And so people typically in general don't plan very well, and they don't prepare. And I always use the 80-20 rule, Pareto's principle. There's going to be about 20% of the people prepare. 80% probably will not. And so that 80%, when they hear this, they get more anxious and stressed. And so, you've got to take a break, and you've got to put things in perspective, is the way I look at it.
Well, we drove, I was driving that mad train with him, and I was, going there too, and I was like, oh wow, we have to prepare, and the funny thing about this is he about 7 years ago, he looked at me and my wife had just became an RN, and he said that they're going to have and he called it. He said they're going to have a fake apocalypse, or there's going to be some type of, virus outbreak. I was going down that road with him, and I think the problem was it was more fear-based than Christ-based, and I realized I had all this doggone food that I couldn't even manage no more, and it was going bad, and people were starving. And I could not tell you the burden and the weight that was lifted off of me when I loaded about 1,000 to 1,500 pounds of food in my truck. Because at church, it was the youth versus the adults. The youth, and on the stadium at my church, to the right was the donations of the parents, and to the left, the youth was kicking our butt until God moved on my heart and I showed up. We spanked them. But I can't tell you the relief when I got rid of that food before it went bad. And I did not want that guilt on my shoulders,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying don't prepare for sure, but we've always got to be careful on kind of a self analysis to make sure we don't get, fear-based. God doesn't want us to be fear-based, but it's okay to prepare, and be smart about it. But I just take breaks from the news and everything because, we can't do anything about that. But you're right, and it's for a time for a different topic. But you're right on the you have to take a break and just do what you can.
But we go back to that next day, after me and my buddy had experienced that, I called my buddy that night. He comes over, and we go out there, and we're like, holy crap, there's a tree branch broke right where he said he came out. And that's about all we could find. So we started researching and talking, and I remember one night, many nights, the cats and the dogs would bark, and they would stare at that little shed to the right of my driveway where the 2 arborvitae rows are, where it goes, 10 feet on my driveway, then at 90s to the road.
Okay.
And on the inside of that 90 is that little shed. And man, the animals would always just look at that shed and freak out. And I remember one night my wife goes, what the hell is going on with that corner? Why are the animals and everything freaking out looking at that corner? And I didn't figure it out till later. It was like, it's because something's hiding in there. It's got double rows of arborvitae. They hide right in the middle. Never be seen.
Sure.
So him and I start talking and researching and talking to guys. So I live to the left of me, looking towards Mount Hood, which is east. So looking east, to the left of me is Washington and Highway 84. The highway is maybe a mile from me, and I'm up on a big, huge knoll, and it drops down to the highway. And my buddy says, I was talking to the neighbor guy that lives right down there on that knoll facing the highway. And he told me that there were really big black homeless men screwing around on his property. And he'd take pot shots at him and hit the bank right next to him, and he said they wouldn't move or do anything. And he'd call the police wouldn't do anything. And so my buddy says, the research I've done, he says, I think these things are coming down up out of the mountain. They run down the freeway right with the trains and the railroad tracks, and then they pop up over here and they have sentinel posts. So we said, all right, okay, great. We walk over and we start looking at the area that I had my first encounter in. And that's when he started telling me about tree breaks and intertwined trees. And sure enough, he was describing it right at the spot I had my first encounter. There were 2 sections of trees that were clearly woven and tied into each other. And I was like, holy crap, you're not kidding. He goes, that's a sentinel post. He says, these things come down through here, and then they run up the green belts, and they hide in between the sticker bushes, and they come to their posts. And they sit here, and they watch all day. And so what we would do is we'd go down there, and we hiked back in there one time, and him and I had an experience, and we hiked. So we went on this trail that parallels in between the freeway and the railroad tracks, and we hiked maybe 6 miles back there. And I didn't see anything, but he had his binoculars out, and he was probably about 100 yards in front of me, and he told me to stop. And before I knew it, he was gone. He just sprinted past me like I couldn't believe, and I had to catch up with him. And he says, I'm pretty sure there was 2 of them down there, and I don't want to mess with it anymore. I said, okay, that's good enough, because we're trying to understand what the heck's going on, right?
Sure.